Welcome to Córdoba. Start your complete audio tour of La Mezquita, the famous mosque cathedral of Córdoba. Just follow the historic streets from your hotel and step into one of the most iconic monuments in Spain. I'll be there to guide you through this incredible space, sharing the stories and secrets that make it so unique. Click on the Google Map link to meet me at the main entrance. See you soon. Just before you enter the mosque cathedral, it's good to know the church bell ringing times. Every day from Monday through Saturday, the small bells at the very top of the tower ring at 9:30 a.m., just before the bell tower opens. On Sundays when Mass is held, the bigger bells below ring between 11:30 a.m. and 12 noon. They seem to ring randomly within this half hour, perhaps depending on Mass and sermon ceremonies. So if you have some extra time or happen to be here through Sunday morning, the bells are absolutely worth a special visit. Let's meet inside now. We're at the main entrance to the mosque cathedral. This is called the Door of Forgiveness. Many churches in Spain used to have this kind of a door. It stems from the concept of indulgence, common to the Catholic Church. Your sins were traditionally forgiven by saying a number of Hail Marys, or if you were rich, by having someone do this for you. It's also said that through these doors you may have been pardoned from a crime or debt. People with a financial burden could seek forgiveness for their remission, and while the story goes that it was actually granted at times, detail around how the debt was paid and who paid it is nowhere to be found. So perhaps it was all just that. A very good story. As we're entering the courtyard of orange trees, have a good look around, especially down at the innovative water channels. The courtyard of orange trees is the oldest part of the mosque cathedral. In the very beginning it was an ablution courtyard for Muslims, as is common in any mosque. Ablution is the act of washing parts of the body, usually the hands, face, and feet to prepare for prayer. The patio's design hasn't changed much over time, with its simple straight pathways and the use of water channels to irrigate the orange trees. It was the caliphs of Córdoba who planted them during the 9th and 10th century, and they are now a signature feature of the courtyard. All throughout Córdoba you will find these bitter orange trees, and while they look fabulous, the oranges are not really edible. The city comes around to harvest them twice a year and makes them into compost. The rind produces a lovely concentrated orange oil. As we move on to the number 3 spot, have a look at the sides of the garden. These are the cloisters. They date back to the 16th century and were added long after the Christian reconquest of the city, which was in 1236. These covered walkways surrounding the courtyard were intended for quiet contemplation and prayer, and they were kind of like a meeting point to have a chat and a walk, and perhaps a coffee or a small ale in those times. They were an essential part of daily life for the clergy and religious leaders, and as you're walking through the cloisters, you're following in the footsteps of centuries of religious devotion, a peaceful echo of the building's diverse history. Next on our list are a number of entrances. Look over to the right wall, facing the mosque cathedral itself. This is number 4 on the map, and it's called the Door of Deans. The Door of Las Palmas, which is number 5, is in the middle. Entry is free here from Monday through Saturday, 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Number 6 on our map is the main paid entrance, is to your right, just beside the Door of Deans. Enter here and I'll meet you inside. We are now in the original part of the mosque built by Abd Al-Rahman I. When Muslims first entered Córdoba in 711 in a relatively peaceful way, they rented half of the Visigoth St. Vincent Church for their services. This cozy agreement worked out very well until a few decades later, when the population had expanded and they simply ran out of space to worship. That's when Abd Al-Rahman I bought the Visigoth property in 785. The Umayyad crown prince started his kingdom in Córdoba after his entire family was killed in Syria, and he barely escaped with his life and a backpack. He tore down the church and built the first mosque to establish the birth of Western Islamic rule in Spain, thus separating himself and power from Damascus rule. Now have a look up and you'll see the white and burgundy arches. They are the heart of La Mezquita, not just because of their structural support and beauty, but because of their optical illusion, making the mosque look taller, more spacious and symmetric, horizontally, vertically, and, have a look on the slant, even diagonally. Also note the columns, and you'll see that many of them are different from each other. This is because Roman, Visigoth and Byzantine ruins were used in the construction. Many of the columns actually differ in height, which is cleverly hidden by their pedestals. The lower arches, in the Visigoth horseshoe style, help support the columns to keep them standing straight. On the sides you'll find the Christian chapels. The original Córdoba mosque was designed with numerous entrances that allowed natural light to flow into the prayer halls. The open doors would have created a spacious and luminous atmosphere during Muslim times. From the 13th to the 18th century, after Córdoba was reconquered by Christian forces, the entrances were slowly converted into chapels around the perimeter of the mosque, gradually transforming it into a cathedral. As you move through the aisles, pay close attention to the alternating red and white voussoirs, the wedge-shaped keystones forming the arch. The red sections in the original structure were made from genuine red brick, which gives them a rich, textured appearance. However, in later expansions, particularly the third one under Al-Mansur in the 10th century, this red brick was nowhere to be found and painted limestone was used instead, to replicate this effect. As we're walking towards the first extension of Abd Al-Rahman II, keep a slight left and you'll notice a glass-covered section on the floor, displaying Visigoth church ruins beneath. This is the first extension of the mosque constructed by Abd Al-Rahman II. Following in his grandfather's footsteps, this caliph gave the mosque a major upgrade in the beginning of the 9th century. He didn't just add more room. He infused the mosque with intricate designs and an artistic flair that made it even more breathtaking and one of the largest mosques in the world at that time. To put it into perspective, the space added by Abd Al-Rahman II is roughly half the size of a modern football field. The entire size of the mosque at this point was about 23,000 square meters or 250,000 square feet, and that's about half the size of Wembley Stadium in the UK or Michigan Stadium in the US. So, imagine if you took half of a massive football stadium and filled it with a stunning array of columns and arches, each with its own unique design. That's the kind of grandeur and scale we're talking about with the mosque's expansion by Abd Al-Rahman II. Meeting you at number 10, walking southward. Have a look at the floor. This is the second extension of Al-Hakam II, which happened more than a century later. You'll note a clear distinction in the floor, marked by a shift in the materials used. It was carried out at the end of the 10th century, and was one of the most significant expansions of the mosque. Al-Hakam, the second caliph of Córdoba, extended the mosque's prayer hall 45 meters further south. This expansion included the addition of 12 new sections and its most notable feature, which was the Mihrab, a beautifully decorated prayer niche that should have indicated the direction of Mecca. But this Mihrab actually faces south. It's believed that his architects followed the construction of the Roman roads instead. But it's also speculated that the caliph wanted his Western Islamic empire to be separated from Damascus by facing his prayer niche in a different direction. The Mihrab. Although not in the center of the mosque, the Mihrab was the main attraction of La Mezquita. This beautifully designed prayer niche shows Córdoba's cultural importance during the 10th century when it was the biggest city in Europe. Imagine it was more than 3 times the size of Paris. Decorated with shiny Byzantine mosaics and detailed geometric patterns, the Mihrab combines artistic styles from around the Mediterranean, showing how architecture expressed power and status. Although at the time of this recording, much of it is unfortunately in scaffolding, you can still imagine the power and wealth it portrayed in Caliphate times. You're not just looking at a religious feature. You're seeing a reminder of a city at its peak in art and intellect. Al-Mansur was the Hajib, the chief minister, who held power in the final days of the Caliphate of Córdoba. He oversaw the last expansion of La Mezquita in 987. This nearly doubled the mosque's size, but unlike the lavish earlier additions, the modest materials and painted limestone arches reflect the waning power of the Caliphate. Now have a look up at the ceiling and arches again. You can clearly see the difference between the earlier red brick arches and the arches made from painted limestone, which was used instead to replicate the same voussoir effect. The difference is subtle but visible if you know where to look. The painted red stones appear smoother and slightly more uniform in color, while the original bricks have a more natural worn texture. Though his work was practical, Al-Mansur's expansion shifted the Mihrab off-center, creating an architectural imbalance. This final expansion marked the last phase under Islamic rule, as the Caliphate slowly began to break down. We are now entering the Christian era and facing the Grand Chapel and High Altar. In 1236, Córdoba was recaptured from the Moors by King Ferdinand III of Castile, marking a significant moment in the Reconquest, the centuries-long effort to reclaim territory from Muslim rule in Spain. This victory came after nearly 500 years of Islamic rule in the city. Ferdinand's forces took Córdoba as part of the broader Christian campaigns to reconquer the provinces of Granada and Andalusia. The day after the conquest, the mosque was consecrated as a Christian cathedral. This marked a significant turning point, and over the centuries, the mosque underwent various transformations to align with its new Christian identity. One of the most striking additions was the construction of the Grand Chapel and High Altar in the 16th century, right at the heart of the mosque. The High Altar, with its grandiose Baroque and Renaissance styles, punctuates the fusion of religious traditions that define the mosque cathedral today. Rising above the forest of arches, this Christian intervention served as a powerful symbol of the new order, built directly in the center of what was once a vast Islamic prayer hall. In the middle of the church we find the transept, the chapel's crossroads. If the Grand Chapel is the heart of the cathedral, then the transept is its crossroads. The transept is a cross-section that cuts right through the church, forming the arms of a cross shape when you look at it from above. This cross layout is something typically found in Christian cathedrals, symbolizing the cross on which Jesus was crucified. For people not familiar with this term, architecturally, the transept is just the part of the building that sticks out horizontally and helps balance the vertical space of the chapel. It makes the church feel bigger and creates a path for processions and ceremonies. In the cathedral, the transept blends into the existing arches, adding another layer to the mixture of Islamic and Christian styles. Cutting through the intricate fabric of the mosque to insert this new Christian design marked another spot where two very different cultures meet in this amazing building. On the sides we find the pulpits. Imagine a time before microphones. In grand churches like this, the pulpits were the elevated platforms where the priest stood to deliver sermons. In simple terms, think of the pulpits as the speaker stage. They were placed up high to make sure everyone could hear the message. Each pulpit is beautifully carved and decorated, like mini works of art themselves. These pulpits became an essential part of the rituals and ceremonies held here. They're not just platforms, they're reminders of how architecture was designed to make a message travel far and wide. Turn around and on the opposite side of the cathedral we find the choir and the organs. The word choir in the cathedral may be short, but it packs a punch when it comes to architectural and artistic beauty. While at the time of this recording you can't enter directly into the choir section, have a close look at the choir stalls. They are beautifully carved from dark wood. Each one tells a story, with intricate scenes from the Bible. The real marvels here, though, are the organs. Towering over the choir, they were renewed in the 18th century. These giants are not just instruments, they're works of art, with gleaming golden pipes and intricate carvings. When their booming notes fill the cathedral, as they still do every Sunday, they create a powerful reverberating sound that matches the grandeur of the building itself. Though the choir may seem kind of tucked away, it was built to flood the vast halls with celestial music, lifting the spirit and enhancing the entire experience. It's a perfect harmony of art and sound, where craftsmanship meets the divine. Around the back of the choir area, we find the Royal Chapel. It was a display of power and piety and represented a dramatic shift in the mosque structure at that time. Once part of the expansive prayer hall, this space was carved out and transformed into a royal chapel for the Castilian kings. To build it, large portions of the original mosque were demolished, making way for Christian altars, elaborate ceilings, and new chapels. The removal of the original architectural elements in favor of imposing Gothic structures served as a statement of dominance, signaling the shift in religious power from Islam to Christianity. It stands today as a solemn reminder of how radically the mosque's sacred space was altered to reflect the will of its new rulers. Around the corner from the Royal Chapel, we find St. Paul's Chapel. St. Paul is called San Pablo in Spanish. The Chapel of San Pablo is another example of the profound changes made to the mosque's original design. Once part of the sprawling Islamic structure, this space was reconfigured and rededicated as a Christian chapel after the Reconquest. This conversion involved removing sections of the mosque's roof and walls to accommodate Christian worship practices, much like other chapels built within the mosque's sacred enclosure. Though less famous, the Chapel of San Pablo also shows the mix of Islamic horseshoe arches and later Christian additions. It's a clear example of how parts of the mosque were changed or removed to fit its new Christian identity. Walking toward the east wall, toward the Museum of San Clemente, you'll find the Last Supper. This isn't just any painting. It's an artistic and cultural statement. Imagine standing in the heart of a former Islamic mosque, under its iconic arches, and encountering one of the most recognized moments in Christian history. This painting, housed in a space originally designed for Islamic worship, creates a striking contrast, reflecting the layers of history embedded within Córdoba. It's a blend of worlds where the art and architecture complement each other in an unexpected harmony. Instead of being confined to the walls of a church, this Last Supper engages with the space around it. An environment that once held different spiritual significance. The painting serves as a witness to Córdoba's layered history, and standing before it, you can feel the interaction between these two rich cultural legacies. It's not just about the artwork, it's about the unique choice of displaying it here, in a space where different eras and beliefs meet. That's what elevates this Last Supper beyond a mere painting, turning it into an experience of time and place. To the left of the Last Supper is the Museum of San Clemente. Once part of the mosque and later incorporated into the cathedral complex, this space showcases how structures can be repurposed for entirely new functions. It's like turning an old factory into a modern art gallery, keeping the bones of the building intact while giving it a fresh, new purpose. The thick walls and intricate details remind us of its long history, and the way it has evolved is a testament to the blend of cultures and religions that have shaped Córdoba. Walking back to the direction of the Mihrab, we find number 21 and 22, the Annunciation and the Saint Teresa Chapel. The Annunciation is one of the key events in Christian tradition, especially within Catholicism. It marks the moment when the angel Gabriel visits the Virgin Mary to tell her she will conceive and become the mother of Jesus. From a broader, secular perspective, the Annunciation is a cultural cornerstone, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and music. As a symbol of new beginnings, it's often portrayed with stunning beauty. You can see this beauty in architecture, like the Chapel of the Annunciation in Córdoba. Take in the peaceful expressions on the figures and the intricate artwork that brings this moment to life. It's a beautiful example of how spiritual themes can be captured through human creativity. Whether or not the religious meaning resonates with you, the artistry and cultural significance of this moment are undeniable. To the right of the Annunciation, we enter the doors to the St. Teresa Chapel and the Treasure. In this chapel, the blend of spiritual devotion and opulence stands out. Originally designed as a Christian addition to the mosque cathedral, the chapel is a tribute to Saint Teresa of Avila. Pay close attention to the intricate altar and religious artwork, showcasing Baroque details that reflect the deep faith of the time. Just beyond, the treasure displays a collection of ornate liturgical objects, including chalices and crosses, symbolizing the wealth and power of the cathedral. These pieces provide a glimpse into the church's historical role not only as a place of worship but also as a custodian of priceless artifacts. Number 23's name, the Villaviciosa Chapel, is a bit deceiving. It's not just a small chapel but a much grander and more prominent part of the cathedral. In fact, it serves as a transept or major aisle, a large space that connects different areas of the structure and is larger than the smaller side chapels. The term chapel in this case can be misleading since it's much more expansive, akin to a grand hallway or transept within the mosque cathedral. Originally part of Abd Al-Rahman I's Grand Prayer Hall, this space became the first Christian chapel after the Reconquest in 1236. To create this chapel, the original mihrab was removed, and large portions of the mosque's roof were torn down. The horseshoe arches, once central to Islamic prayer, were repurposed and stripped of their religious significance, though traces of the Arabic Mudegar style, with its intricate blend of Islamic and Christian design, remain in the decorative detailing. Layers of Gothic and Renaissance design were imposed over the Islamic foundation, creating a visual reminder of the destruction and transformation imposed during the transition from mosque to cathedral. At the back wall, you'll find the Visigoth Museum of San Vicente. This museum showcases remnants from a time when the Visigoths ruled much of the Iberian Peninsula from the 5th to the 8th century. After the Roman era and before the Grand Mosque was erected, a Visigothic Christian basilica stood here, dating back to around the 6th century. When we talk about the Visigothic era, think of it as the bridge between the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of Islamic Spain. If Córdoba's Islamic Golden Age was like Apple's iPhone launch, game-changing and culturally significant, the Visigoth period was more akin to the early computers. Essential groundwork, yet often overlooked. Seeing these pieces in the museum, you're reminded that before the layers of Islamic architecture, Christian kings, and later power struggles, Córdoba was already a religiously and culturally important site. The artifacts may not be flashy, but their significance lies in their resilience, surviving eras of conquest and change, and is a subtle reminder of history's complexity. To the left of the museum is the Chapel of El Sagrario, which is an impressive feat of both religious devotion and architectural engineering. Built as the treasure room of the cathedral, this space was designed to hold sacred relics and serve important religious functions. Mass is still held here, which is why it's surrounded by thick glass to keep noise out. Think of it like a high-tech vault of today, designed for security but with an aesthetic flair. Its detailed craftsmanship and the vaulted ceiling allowed it to stay structurally sound over the centuries, much like how modern vaults are designed to protect valuable assets. Look up and notice the way the architecture draws your eye upward, emphasizing the importance of what was once kept within. As we are almost finished the indoor tour and will be leaving the building to get a look at the outer doors, I'd like to point out a not-so-famous Abd Al-Rahman III. Abd Al-Rahman III is often overlooked for merely having constructed the minaret in 951 AD, but he did more than just that. He was the first caliph of Córdoba, who declared independence from the Abbasid Caliphate during his reign. It marked the very peak of Córdoba's power, turning the city into one of the most splendid and cultured centers of the medieval world. Beyond military strength, he invested heavily in architecture, extending La Mezquita out toward what is now the bell tower, and constructed the glittering palace city of Medina Az-Zahara 7.5 kilometers outside of Córdoba. His reforms transformed Córdoba into a beacon of knowledge, art, and religious tolerance, where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars thrived. Abd Al-Rahman III can be compared to Louis XIV of France, who transformed Versailles into a symbol of French power, culture, and opulence. Both rulers were visionaries who sought to elevate their cities and realms through ambitious architectural and cultural projects. For a current Western comparison, you might look at Elon Musk, a visionary leader who has transformed the world around him through groundbreaking projects and ambitious goals. He may not always be popular, but Musk's work, whether in building SpaceX, Tesla, or even his plans for a city on Mars, has redefined the limits of modern technology and commerce, just as Abd Al-Rahman III redefined Córdoba as a center of power, culture, and architectural brilliance. For just €3, climbing La Mezquita's bell tower offers an incredible view of Córdoba that's worth every step. From Monday through Saturday, you can book a half-hour slot every 30 minutes from 9:30 a.m. until evening, giving you time to make the climb, capture panoramic shots of the city, and admire the iconic orange tree courtyard below. On Sundays, due to morning mass and the big bells chiming between 11:30 a.m. and noon, the tower opens for visits only in the afternoon. So plan ahead to catch this unforgettable perspective on Córdoba's rich history and beauty. We've come to the end of the indoor tour. Hang out inside a bit longer. There's just so much to see. Then come and check out the beautiful doors and archways on the outside of the mosque cathedral. On the west wall walking toward the river, we find number 27, the milk door, aptly named to receive the milkman or other deliveries. The door of Sebastian and Saint Michael were named after famous saints. The palace door got its name because it once led directly to the palace complex where the ruling caliphs lived. Built during the reign of Al-Hakam II, this private entrance highlighted the caliph's elevated status and allowed him to enter the mosque from the palace without mingling with the general public. On the other side of La Mezquita on the east wall, the door of Sagrario is a magnificent example of the city of Córdoba's ongoing dedication to restoring these UNESCO buildings. As you can see in this side-by-side image, the door on the very left is weathered and decayed. The one to its right was restored at one point in time, but also needs sprucing up. Whereas the door of Sagrario, the one on the very right, has had a restorative facelift, staying in the ancient mosque style. Have a look at the difference between the old door on the very left, the renovated one to its right, and the third one over to the right, beautiful and completely restored. Now we've come to the end of the entire tour. I hope you found it informative and above all, enjoyable. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like a personal walking tour to get insights into local customs, good-to-know stuff, and discover Córdoba through the eyes of a local foreigner, check out experiencecordoba.com. Hope to meet you in person.